This is ridiculous. I am sick, but I'm not sick. I have allergies. Is there any less manly of a way to be sick? Like, oh man, you sound so sick. You look so sick. Like your eyes keep watering and your throat is scratchy, and you're like, yeah, it's because of wind and then tree dust. Like, anyways, we'll get started. Hi, my name is Father Mike Schmitz, and this is Ascension Presents. So, I in the past made a video about stonewalling, and it's how it relates to relationships and how it can be one of the four horsemen that Dr. John Gottman talks about. Dr. John Gottman was a psychologist who claimed to be able to do this. Here's one of his big claims. He claimed he could watch and listen to a couple have a discussion on any topic for 15 minutes, and with, I think he said 90% accuracy, be able to predict whether their marriage was headed to divorce or whether they were going to be fine. Now that's a huge claim, but what he noted was he didn't just kind of say that. He actually studied couples and how they spoke to each other and how they responded to each other. And the presence of four of these, what he called the horsemen of the apocalypse, was an indicator, a really strong indicator of the health of the relationship. And so it's important, I think, to look into what are those things and what can you do if you're in a relationship, or if you're going to be in a relationship, what can you do to protect or almost kind of bomb-proof your relationship. So we already talked about stonewalling, had a whole video about that. So the next one is defensiveness. One defensive posture can be like, oh yeah, well you also da-da-da-da-da, right? So it's that sense of, or you didn't make it clear enough to me. It's that sense of I'm not able to take an honest critique, an honest correction. So being unwilling to take that honest correction would be defensiveness. But there's another kind of passive defensiveness. And what I mean by passive defensiveness is it's a certain kind of posture where I have the sense that I always have to be on my guard around this person. And so that could be something like, hey, did you take a nap today? And the defensive person is like, why are you asking? I was tired, that kind of a thing. Or someone say, hey, where you been? And that defensiveness in the relationship is like, you're asking me because you want to bust me somehow. You're asking me because you want to criticize it somehow. That's why sometimes defensiveness is response to criticism. This even can happen in parent-child relationships. I know that I have a certain degree of, or I had maybe as a kid, a certain degree of defensiveness when my parents were asking me what'd you do this weekend? Or what did you do last night with your friends? And wait, why? Are you asking because you just want to know and you're curious? Or are you asking me because you want to correct me again? Or because you want to, again, bust my chops? Something like that, you think I must be doing something wrong. So that attitude or posture of defensiveness reveals something important. What it reveals is there's not a lot of trust here. Right? Okay, so defensiveness, already talked about stonewalling. The third one, criticism. Criticism is very different than simply correction or offering what you might call constructive critique, right? So correction is, hey, you said you would pick up the dry cleaning and you didn't, and that made me sad. Or I'm really upset because I told you this, I think 3 times last week, I reminded you of this thing and you didn't do it. That's not criticism in the same sense that Gottman means it. That's simply telling the truth, right? So criticism would be more along the lines of, I'm drawing a direct correlation between this behavior and your character. So it'd be something like, you were late again. You can never be counted on for anything. Or you said you were going to pick up the dry cleaning, whatever, they use that example. You said you were pick up the dry cleaning and you didn't do it. You only care about yourself. So criticism is that sense of again, taking a small example and extrapolating it to your character. That's one way that criticism can rear its head. The other way is if it's simply always present. What I mean by that is the idea of, I want to know this thing because I'm going to try to offer correction. So I use the example of defensiveness. Did you take a nap earlier today? And the person who's defensive knows that what's coming next is if they say yes, it's like, wow, I have a judgment now on your behavior. Whether it's said or not, it's like, oh, okay, so, must be nice to be able to take a nap in the middle of the day, or, that you must be lazy, or whatever that kind of thing is, that that I'm asking this question, because the criticism, the presence of criticism is I'm asking this question, I want to know this information so that I can actually make a judgment about it. The fourth horseman of the apocalypse Gottman talks about is contempt, and he says it's the worst because we're the most powerful of all of them. Because at the root of contempt is a sense of disrespect. If one of the most important things, and this is one of the most important things that has to be present in a relationship for it to be healthy, for it to thrive, for it to grow, is respect, like mutual respect. I always tell my marriage prep couples, I'm talking quickly because I want to put a lot of information into this one video. Even more foundational, I tell my marriage prep couples in a relationship, more foundational than love is respect. Contempt is a either verbal or visible, physical indication of I do not respect you, or I do not respect what you just said, or I do not respect what you just did. So it can take the form of words, where someone says something along those lines. It most often takes the form of nonverbals. That kind of sense of, here's the guy and the girl, or the people dating, the couple dating, the married couple, and they're out in public, and one of them is willing to kind of like mock or tease the other in the presence of people they respect. Or basically trying to put them down a peg. Now, there's one thing about like couples like, no, we really like teasing each other. That's part of our fun. It's part of our charm, part of the dynamic of our relationship. It's cute. Like that is completely fine. That can be present. But it's when that happened in public in front of his friends or in front of her friends that all of a sudden it's like, okay, that just went to a new level, because rather than us just kind of like having this friendly banter back and forth, now it was a situation where I was made to feel less, or at least what you indicated to them was that you don't respect me. Now, I'll make a whole video about contempt at some point because it's so powerful. Needless to say, if you have ever been in a relationship and you're like, oh yeah, I've seen that, but it didn't really hurt us. I've seen, the criticism, we've had defensiveness, we've had stonewalling in our relationship, and it didn't really hurt us. That's because you most likely have what Dr. John Gottman calls the golden ratio. And this is the last thing here. So, because here's the fact of the matter is, in any kind of relationship, you're going to have moments where, contempt kind of popped its head out there, or that criticism was present, or there was a feeling of defensiveness, some actions of stonewalling. They're always going to be present because it's just kind of like, that's how we work, right? We're not perfect people and we don't have perfect relationships. So how can you bomb-proof your relationship when you know that these four horsemen are going to, and others are going to be present in your relationship? Gottman says the golden ratio. His golden ratio was this: for every one of the four horsemen, there were 5 actions or words of the opposite, right? So for every time there was like one time of contempt that was just kind of reared its head, there were at least 5 times of, giving respect, of honoring the other person. For every one time there was criticism, there was at least 5 times of building up the other person, of like not judging, of like affirming them. For every one time there was stonewalling, there was 5 times of being willing to meet one's spouse, one's boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever it is, one's friend, in a place where they were calling you to come up or come down to meet with them. Like the idea is 5 to 1, the golden ratio. So if you find yourself in a place where it's like, man, these four horsemen have been actually rearing their heads. I find myself constantly defensive. I feel really disrespected. I don't feel stable in this relationship. If you want to turn it around, you can. And turning it around looks like what Gottman points out: beginning to live the golden ratio. Beginning to say, okay, I'm going to actively, not simply responsibly, I'm going to proactively try to include things in our relationship like the opposite of criticism, like praise, the opposite of contempt, offering respect. The opposite of stonewalling is meeting the person where they're at. And the opposite of defensiveness, which is like opening oneself up to that point of like, okay, you can feel free to like offer what it is that you need to offer me, and I will feel free to offer that positive thing that I need to offer you. Those are couple quick things for all of us here at Ascension Presents. My name is Father Mike, and God bless. And stay away from that wind and tree dust. It gets in your eyes, man. It just messes up with everything. God bless.